Brian Cranley, the author of The Call of Wonder.
I have this random educational background of biomedical engineering and philosophy and theology. I never thought the two would go together. I was watching a YouTube video and the two worlds came colliding. That's what started the books. Mass and energy were equal, all one thing. All the four forces of physics were one thing. And that's when my philosophy just hit me in the face, because that sounded exactly like how Aristotle described the divine simplicity. It's a philosophical way to describe God, bring some of these old ideas back to the modern conversation, because I think they're valuable for our day today. I want them to take away that God is real. I think, like we talked about, a return to wonder. It'll restore a lot of mental health.
Good evening on my side, afternoon on your side.
Yeah.
Today we have Brian Cranley, which is the author of The Call of Wonder. We will discuss today with Brian about the book, how did he came to the idea, and what is the main focus of the book. Let me say it like this. Before we get into the book, like always, I like to know your whereabouts, a bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. So I am located in Texas. I was born in Michigan in the U.S., but moved to Texas when I was young. And I've kind of lived all over Texas, but right now I'm working in Fort Worth and living in San Antonio. So I'm commuting like 4 hours back and forth each week. Yeah. So anyway, I do medical device sales as my daytime job, and I've been doing that for about 16 years with 2 different companies. Really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun, but I have this random educational background of biomedical engineering on one side for science and philosophy and theology on the other side, because I went to the seminary for 5 years and got philosophy and theology. And so I never thought the two would go together since I decided not to do full-time ministry. But then one day I was watching a YouTube video and the two worlds came colliding, and that's what started the book. So here we are.
Are you coming from a family with the religious background? Let's say, so the religion came from home?
Yes. Yeah. My family is Catholic and we grew up Catholic. My parents kind of raised us in that. And then I kind of fell away for a while, came back, fell away, came back. And, yeah, so I'm still Catholic today. That's my faith background. But I also like to just study religion. So I study world religions and love the cult documentaries on Netflix and all that.
I had a cult member. I had a cult member invited in one of the episodes. And
really?
She was a prisoner in a cult in London, man. If you can imagine.
Oh wow! Did she get out?
Yeah, she did get out.
Wow.
It's insane to hear her story. Like, it's insane. It's just crazy. Sorry for going on a rant. So
that's
maybe for transparency and non-practical orthodox here, so that we. Did your family encourage the dual interest, like the science and the religion, or the science was something that came from you?
Yeah, no, I would say they encouraged it. My dad and my mom are both chemists, so they work for Dow Chemical. They met; they're both chemists, and then my dad was really good about, recognizing our personal interests when we were growing up. And I wanted to go to medical school, so that's where I went into biomedical engineering. But I also just loved math and physics, and so he encouraged me to get the engineering degree instead of just a biology degree on the pre-med track. And so I did that, which turned out to be great because I fell back. I didn't go to med school and I ended up falling back on the engineering degree. So I'm glad I did that. But yeah, I kind of combined sciences in my undergrad, and then because we were raised in the faith, that, felt like a higher calling to go to philosophy and theology. And to be honest with you, I was terrified to study philosophy. I thought I'd be bored out of my mind. And some of it I was, but I remember telling my dad, I'm scared to study this. And then after we learned about Plato and Aristotle and some of the scholasticism, it's just something that I could never forget after I learned it. Just kind of changed the way I thought from then on.
I think it's something which is coming more and more in the public speech lately. At least this is
I
my
think so.
feeling. Yeah. So I think the Stoics more than anything, because they try to, or let me put it another way, they are bringing a peace in the crazy world that we're living in, and I think that's why they are in the foreground. But I think
Yep.
the philosophy is coming back in trend. Let's
Yeah.
say.
I think Stoicism's big because you can avoid the religious discussion. You can use it as a philosophy for, you can use it whether you're religious or not as a way to handle life. And so it's a useful tool for a lot of people. So I can see why it's making a big impact, around the general public. But that's kind of my impetus, is wanting to join in that conversation and help bring some of these old ideas back to the modern conversation, because I think they're valuable for our day today.
It's so interesting, and I will stop the rant. It's so interesting. I read Marcus Aurelius' book, and it's impressive how actual his statements are.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can explain to someone. I didn't
Right.
believe it before I read it. So
He's just a normal guy, the emperor, normal guy.
and he wrote that for himself. Like he wrote that, like not not having in mind that someone will ever read that, and it's absolutely correct today, even today. Crazy.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
You said something about the video that kind of brought the words together for you. Can you tell us the story of the science video that you've seen?
Yes. So I was just coming home from work, looking to relax, and I'm a science nerd. So I looked up a video on the origin of the universe, the first moment of the Big Bang, and it was put out by Fermilab, a particle accelerator lab in Chicago, I think. Anyway, it was just about what happened at the beginning of the time, or what happened at the Big Bang, and the way they described some of the new theories that are coming out. Basically, that mass and energy were one and the same thing, like a radiation type plasma energy, because the conditions of the very early universe were so intense. And then there's another theory called the grand unified theory that talks about the four forces of physics under those intense conditions all might have also been one and the same force. And a lot of this is coming out of the particle accelerator, particle colliders like CERN. And so you had mass and energy were equal, all one thing. All the four forces of physics were one thing. And that's when my philosophy just hit me in the face, because that sounded exactly like how Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas describe a doctrine known as the divine simplicity, which basically says, it's a philosophical way to describe God, that he is perfectly indivisible. So he is one. Not only is he one God, but he's one in everything. So, we talk about God's power, God's love, God's goodness, but the reality is, in God, those are all one and the exact same thing. There's nothing to divide out in God. And so that was like the main idea. I was like, gosh, the first moment of time sounds a lot like how the philosophers of old described the essence of God. And that started the book, but led to so many more really fascinating things about the universe and biological life and the human mind. And so it's been a learning process as I wrote, but my own wonder continues to grow in these topics even after finishing the book.
Do you think that the video was the click of an idea, and that triggered this idea that was in there since long time? Or do you think if the video was just what brought the ideas together?
Great question, because the ideas were building over time. So my two physician buddies, Tim and Tom Rotino, they went to Creighton, a Catholic university, and in their biology class, they were made to read Richard Dawkins' book, The Blind Watchmaker, which is, a total atheist account of evolution. And so I was like, man, at Creighton University, they had you read this. So I went and read it, and I remember thinking, I understand a lot of what he's saying. A lot of it makes sense, that evolution looks random. And then at the very end, he describes God, what I thought is incorrectly. At the very end, he describes God as the most complex, he would have to be the most complex composite being, sort of at the top of the chain of all the animals, the most complex. And I was like, Well, that's kind of his picture of God is the opposite of the divine simplicity, which I had learned, where God is the most simple of all creatures, but also the most powerful, simple in composition. And so I was thinking, man, I wonder if God wrote his infinity into the evolutionary process. And maybe that's why it looks random, is that the actual path taken through an infinite number of choices, it appears random, but maybe on some other scale in God's mind, it's not random, it's guided. And so those ideas were kind of brewing, but it wasn't until I saw that video by Fermilab that it kind of like cemented this idea that this is a strong enough idea to, pursue. And so what I did after I had those, that aha moment was I looked online for 6 months to see if anybody had said these ideas in this way, because I still hadn't thought about writing a book. But after I couldn't find it anywhere and it just kept sticking with me, then I heard, I think Tim Ferriss talk about you should only write a book when the pain of keeping the idea in is worse than the pain it takes to write a book. So that's when I finally was like, all right, I need to write this down and get it out there. So that's what started the book off.
The connection between religion and science is something which it's really interesting. As I said, I'm a baptized Orthodox, because the habit is like in Catholics, you're getting baptized like really early with some months.
Yeah.
So I was a practitioner as long as I was at home, but it was not so strong as I know it from the American culture. So it was every once in a while, maybe for Easter, maybe for Christmas, and that was it. So
I mean, that's American Catholicism. That's,
okay,
95% of Catholics.
Okay.
Maybe 80%. Yeah.
And I always had this big questions in my head, but like nobody was, I didn't had I was doing my own research, like you said, and there was a statement, and I will make a funny excurse, I hope at least. I don't know if you know the TV series Young Sheldon.
Yeah.
Do you know Young Sheldon? Yeah. So in Young Sheldon, there's an episode in which he has the discussion with his mother. His mother is a religion freak, I would call it like this, and he's a science freak, and they have the discussion together, and she was really upset, and then at the end he said, I think it exists because the gravity, it's so exact. If it would be less, we would fly. If it would be more, it would be hard to walk. And it's perfect. Yeah. And that's something which struck a crazy thing in my head. I said, that really makes sense. It's a TV series, but that really makes sense. Yeah. And I think the gravity is not the only one. Like you said, there are a lot of things which are connected, and everything is too perfect. Like everything is too perfect. But most probably will not know. We can make assumptions. It's nice to discuss about this. But
I love it. Yeah, I love hearing both sides of it as well.
Exactly. Why the title, The Call of Wonder?
Yeah, so the only thing I knew I wanted when I started out the book was the word wonder somewhere in the title. And for anyone who's written a book, they know that almost every title's been taken already. So if you try to put in whatever title you want, there's probably 2 other books already written. And so I can't even remember what originally, I think I just wanted to call it Wonder, but that's a really popular fiction book with a movie. So the Call of Wonder came about because 2 things. I wanted wonder because wonder is the common experience between science and faith. So if you go into a cathedral or an Orthodox, church with all the iconography, there's just this sense of awe and wonder, and you're humbled. Even whether you believe in God or not, you go into some of these cathedrals, these old cathedrals and churches, and it's beautiful art, beautiful architecture. But then the scientist, you think of the atheist scientist. Why are they drawn to continually search the stars and find out more? What is that in us that keeps drawing us towards understanding more? Almost this insatiable drive to understand. And then you think of the philosopher. Socrates, I think, said wisdom begins in wonder, or the pursuit of wisdom begins in wonder. And for him, it meant like philosophical inquiry, like wondering about the world around you. Why is the world the way it is? Why does change happen? What is a good life? Just asking these why questions. And so wonder in one word encompasses philosophy, theology, and science, which is what I'm trying to bring together in this book. And then the call of wonder I put on there. Sorry, I'm looking at the title right here. The call of wonder I put on there because I wanted the action to be that God is the one calling us. He's written something into us as humans that desires to know and to find out. And that he's the one that created everything, that exists. And so it's a response to an active call and not we didn't create this wonder, but it's a response to a call. So the title kind of encompasses all that together.
This is so interesting because I always have seen it as the experience of wonder, that we are experiencing the wonder, not that. But this makes it even more interesting. I like the idea. I like it because I saw it from a different perspective, and I saw it like we are experiencing the wonder, which is also something that we do.
It's true.
Exactly.
Yeah, we do experience it. Yeah.
Exactly. But like you said, that we all have this call to find stuff around, to investigate, to research, and I think that's a nice way of putting it. Like I like it. I'll admit, Brian, when I first saw the subtitle, I expected a more heavy handed religious argument. That was my prejudice when I took the book in my hand. Yes, absolutely. I'm absolutely honest with you. But the book surprised me. It spent a lot of time with philosophy and science before it even touches theology.
Yeah.
What can modern readers learn from Plato, from Aristotle, from the great philosophers about God and meaning?
Yeah. So that's a great. I'm just going to show the cover one more time because the subtitle is, I don't know if we can see it, but
correct.
How the God of Reason created science in his image. And the God of Reason is how we learned in seminary. There's the God of revelation, whether you follow the Bible or the Quran or whatever your holy text is. It's revealed to you. God himself tells you what he's like. And then there's the God of Reason, which is a 2,000 plus year old conversation that's been going on that the modern civilization has kind of lost. And that's what I wanted to summarize in the first half of the book. So the conversation from Plato to Aristotle to Augustine to Aquinas is basically the arguments for God's existence from natural reasoning and logic. And it's the philosophical arguments for God, which is why I was trying to get that across in the word, the God of reason, but I don't know. I could have said the God of philosophy. But basically, Plato is the first one to argue that immaterial and non-physical things can actually exist. So does courage, beauty, truth, are those real things in themselves, or are those just made up and things that humanity agrees on in our minds? Then Aristotle took this idea of these immaterial forms, is what Plato called them, and he said they do exist, but they exist within individual material things themselves and in our minds as well. Then Augustine and Aquinas took that conversation farther and said, well, they can't only exist in our minds, because if all of humanity died out and a whole new race of humans came to Earth, they would discover the same laws of physics, the same idea of truth, beauty, goodness. So they must have an existence on their own. And that's where scholasticism came to the conclusion that all these things, math, beauty, courage, exist in the divine intellect. That's the only place that they can actually exist, is in the mind, in the intellect of God. And so once you get to this argument that immaterial things can exist, then you can get to the idea that God, who is immaterial, can exist. And so it's sort of like the foundational conversation for the proofs of God that Aquinas is known for. So I wanted to summarize that education that I got, that stuck with me, for the people that no longer get that education, because liberal arts educations are much rarer these days.
You put it so nice.
So I'm trying to summarize it in 4 chapters for you. It's a lot.
Yeah, you
it's
put
pretty
it so
dense,
nice.
but
no, you put it so nice when you said it's not so common these days. I would say it's absolutely missing, and I'm sorry to say that.
I mean, now we just specialize in our career. Computer programming or engineering. We specialize in our whatever we're going to do, but I think we've lost some of the just wisdom about life in general.
General knowledge. I think general knowledge is missing,
Yeah.
and it's called in Romanian, and the one-to-one translation is called general culture, but I don't see it as culture. Itself, I think, is general knowledge, which is missing. Like, I keep giving this example, which is funny. Like, always when you ask someone from Europe, where is I don't know, Illinois in US, the state of Illinois, nobody will be able to point it on the map. And it's the same like if you have someone from US, where is Hungary, I don't know if there are a lot of people who are able to point it. So it's exactly, it's the same. It's absolutely the same. Like, it's general knowledge. Like, we don't care that much. It's not something which impacts our life. And I think that's the problem. We learn to see everything what's here, and of course what social media is feeding us day by day.
Yeah.
You quoted a lot of philosophers, Brian. Which one resonates with you the most?
Thomas Aquinas is probably the preeminent Catholic philosopher, but he resonates with me the most because, like I mentioned in my book, he's known as the great synthesizer because he had access to all of the philosophers and theologians that came before him, plus a genius level intellect. And so in Aquinas, he's quoting Augustine, Maimonides, Averroes, Avicenna. He's quoting scripture all over the place, and he's quoting Plato and Aristotle, but Aristotle is the one he loves the most, so he just calls him the philosopher instead of by his name. And so I feel like if you read Aquinas, you get a lot of these other thinkers, kind of like if you read Plato, you get Socrates as well. But I guess Aristotle is probably one of the most influential philosophers for all these ideas because Aquinas based almost everything he did on Aristotle. That being said, it's very difficult to go read the source text for any of these guys. I feel like most of what I learned was from a good teacher who could translate it for me. So I tried to do that another level down for the person who's never had any of this and just wants to read one book.
Correct. Absolutely agreeing with you. Agreeing with you.
It's not easy reading.
No. Especially because, like, you have the translations, and then you have translation of translations, and then you don't have the original anymore, and then it's gone. Like, I think the devil sticks in the details, right? And it's always like, three miracles of science you're mentioning in the book. Why these three? Why universe, life, and mind?
Great question. I think, and I've thought about this more since writing, but those are the three big mysteries that we can't really explain, even though atheist materialists would like to say they all have a purely natural explanation, if maybe we haven't quite found it yet. But I've been thinking more and more about miracles in general and what is a miracle. And I feel like these miracles of science, the Big Bang, which is, matter and energy from nothing, abiogenesis, which is the first living cells that came from non-living matter, and the human mind. If you're a pure evolutionist, an atheist evolutionist, then we just somehow got these cognitive abilities through biological processes of a larger brain or more complex brain. But I don't think any of those purely naturalistic explanations explain those three events well enough, because the distance between our cognitive ability and the second smartest animal is almost infinite. It's just this chasm. You don't see this sort of animal that's almost as intelligent as we are. And then in the first cells, we still can't recreate a living cell in our labs, even though we should have the knowledge necessary to do that by now. We still can't do it. And we still can't explain, obviously, a universe from nothing. Even if you go to the multiverse explanation or the cyclical universe where it's Big Bang, we're expanding, and then we somehow crunch back down and we keep cycling, or there's an infinite number of universes, it still doesn't explain, like Aristotle's unmoved mover first cause, the necessity of a first cause. It kind of just pushes the problem back farther, or into an infinite number of dimensions. So I feel like there's this mystery to those three things. And now I see that almost every miracle in the Judeo-Christian scriptures has the same sort of quality to it, which blows my mind now. Every time God acts, he does some kind of supernatural event, but he uses a natural medium. So the burning bush, he uses a bush that's on fire, but he didn't necessarily need to do that. He could have just appeared. He parts the Red Sea. Again, he could have, brought down something, horses from heaven, who knows. Jesus uses mud to heal. He's spitting. He uses spit. He uses water for baptism, bread for communion, fish, right, to pay the temple tax, or fish just catching the loads of fish. It's always something natural, and this is blowing my mind now. And so if you're Catholic or Orthodox, that's how we view the Mass. The divine liturgy is the bread turns into the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus, but it doesn't look like it. It still looks like bread. And so there's this natural miracle. I don't know how to best define it, but what's blowing my mind is that these miracles throughout Scripture are matching these three miracles of science. And that is just kind of something cool to think about.
I never thought about this like this, but like you said, it's the body, but it's not the body. Like you don't see it like this. You see it like the actual nature. So it
appears like bread, yeah. So like with the first cells of abiogenesis, they would just look like it just happened. These cells happened. The amino acids, everything came together, formed the first cell wall. But in that is the miracle, is what I'm trying to say. In this apparently natural thing. Is the miracle. And another way I at the very end of the book, I talk about how this happens every time nature levels up like a step in being. So you have nothingness, then you have the Big Bang, and it goes to material, inanimate material. And then you have material floating around in the oceans, and then you have the first living cell. So you step up to life. Then you have millions and millions of years of life, and eventually the first human. And so you step up to the immortal soul. My argument is that God places the soul into the primate line at the right time. And then at the virgin birth of Jesus, it steps up to God. And so you have, nothingness, material, life, the immortal soul, and God. And so just trying to say he's patterned everything after himself. And you can see it in the science, which is pretty cool.
But this is what I want to say. It's like evolution, but seen different, right?
Yeah. I'm still a proponent of evolution. I don't exactly know, the fine details of how evolution happened as well as some of my friends do. But I think God placed a soul into the evolutionary line to create humanity. And so the body comes from science and nature, but the soul comes from God, just like we believe every baby that's born has a soul created, but the material stuff of our body comes from our parents. So I'm also fascinated with the miracles of science and the miracles of Jesus because there's no fanfare involved. If God really did create the world with a big bang, it just blows my mind that no one knew about it until, our generation. Just very recently, we figured out how the universe started. And when Jesus does miracles, a lot of people, there's no fireworks, there's no fanfare. People walk away, they don't even come back to say thank you. It's just, what it does for me is it elevates the everyday world. The miracle is just the normal everyday world. That is the miracle. It doesn't have to be this crazy, big spectacle. It's the everyday that is where the miracle is found.
Do you think we have lost the capacity to see these miracles today? Why I'm asking, I always made the example that if today a guy is coming on the street in New York and says, "I'm Jesus," they will just ask him, "Where did you buy your weed?" That's the only question that you will get. So,
yeah. Well, I think, the human conversation is obviously moving away from these type of things, but like we said, I think the human hunger is, dying for something deeper. And so I'm fascinated with the onset of AI and all this artificial intelligent content on social media. It's pretty cool. It's cool, but it lacks depth. It lacks the human creative touch. And so I think we're going to get sick of that more and more and more as a culture and be looking for the deeper. And so hopefully this conversation sparks back up because people are yearning for it.
I love the paper from Apple who actually came out and said no that there is no power of argumentation, there is no reasoning, no, it's just patterns. Like it's
Just patterns.
don't get so excited. It's just patterns that they identify and they give you answer. That's it.
Yeah.
Like that's what AI is. Yeah. Um. Why is consciousness such a mystery? And how would you define it based on your research until now?
Yeah, I'm so formed in scholasticism, that ancient scholasticism. I define the human person as the hybrid of body and soul. And so you have this spiritual, immortal soul that animates the body, but both are necessary. So the brain, there is something to evolution, there is something to neuroscience, obviously. But consciousness, there's two powers to the soul that Aquinas talks about, which is the intellect and the will, your ability to think and rationalize, and then your ability to choose freely. And so I would think consciousness is the combination of those two, the intellect and the will. But I think it's so mysterious and so deep because it's directly tied to God and the divine life. And so I think it's going to be an eternal mystery for the atheist that's trying to explain it through biology alone. I don't think there's ever going to be a good explanation just from that. That is part of the explanation, but not the whole story. And so that depth to the human person, and obviously the inherent dignity to each person, comes from the soul that animates it and that connection with God living in the soul.
I think that's a really interesting point, because that was one of the things that I was thinking while reading the book. If there will come a day in which science will be able to explain all of this, because I think that there are a lot of things which we try to explain for ourselves, and we don't know if one day there's going to be a science base beside this. So I think this combination, I do have the same opinions. It's so interesting. We live thousands of miles away. We have different backgrounds, and I do have the same opinion that we have a unique identifier, if we call it purely scientific, which is the soul and the body. You cannot combine or switch one with the other, because you would get a different person. That's my understanding as well. I cannot explain it. I cannot explain it, but this is my assumption that I have today, my working assumption.
And I talk about this in the book. If you're looking from a pure human history point of view, art and worship are found almost everywhere that human remains are found, after about 70 to 250,000 years ago, something like that. But before that time, there's never any art or worship in the animal kingdom. And so there's definitely something different about the human animal, in that it recognizes these deeper things in life. And one of the basic philosophical principles is that like recognizes like. So if you are able to know what truth, beauty, goodness, and the idea of infinity are, there has to be something in you that has some sort of equivalent nature to it. And so it's just a basic philosophical argument for the existence of a soul or something deeper that matches the world that we have visibility to, that no other animal does.
Absolutely. Talking about different backgrounds, how do you think the different faith traditions are interpreting the scientific discovery? Because we have there is an godlike explanation for everything in the culture where I come from. Some of them are extremely funny. Some of them are sad. How do you think they got them?
Their views on science?
Yes.
Well, I mean, if you read Genesis, most of us grew up thinking Genesis is literal as a kid, the story of Genesis. And then as you get older, you learn about science. And that view is still around today, called young earth creationism. But then as you learn about science, you start thinking, oh, well, maybe it wasn't 24-hour literal days. Maybe the creation happened over eons, and that's called old earth creationism. And then now you have people like Francis Collins, the head of the Human Genome Project, who talks about theistic evolution or evolutionary creationists, which I'm leaning more towards, which is that God used evolution as his tool to create, and that Genesis has to be read sort of poetically, like in context of the type of text it is. Not that it's not true, but just that it has to be read in that context. And so a lot of people, if you don't follow those arguments, you're still left with the literal interpretation of Genesis that you grew up with, and some cultures have that deeply baked in. I can't speak as well for Islam or Hinduism on their beliefs on creation or science, but I like the faiths that allow reason and rationality to be a big part of it, and that's why I've kind of stuck with Catholicism, because they have a deep respect for the rational side of faith. But I don't know, how. That's just my personal experience. I don't know how everyone else was raised and what that is. But I mean, what are your thoughts on orthodoxy?
I think the problem with orthodoxy that I was raised in is that it has a powerful political influence from Russia. Because the Orthodox, we are Russian Orthodox because we had a big influence from Russia back then, and the problem was that it's so interesting. So the whole area that I come from was at the beginning. So before communism, it was Catholics, all the area. So you can see it in the churches, how the churches are laid out and so on, and they were orthodoxified, if I can use this term, with the coming of communists at the beginning, because the beginning of the Communist Party, they were Orthodox, but then they decided no, religion is not something that we will allow because that allows people to think, and they made it illegal. So the churches were still there, but there was a war day on Sunday, so you could not go. Like, for example, a crazy story, there was during Easter, there was this, the habit says that we have to have the resurrection service happening in the middle of the night, so exactly 12 a.m.
Okay.
Don't ask me now why, but that was the reason. It was not allowed to be done 12 a.m. because everybody was at work, and it was done 3, 4, 5 a.m. in the morning so that people could secretly go to the service. And what I want to say, everything that was included in the beliefs of the church had a powerful political influence. Like, I don't know, things like tradition, like we are the biggest and the greatest, and everything is we are allowed to have everything, and everyone has something against us, and that was powerful in injected in the religion. So that's why I feel that I'm a bit subjective, and I really had a bad influence in the religion, and I can say that unfortunately, what you see today in the Orthodox Church is the same as it was. So the politics are not changed. Most of the big boss of the Romanian Orthodox Church was a former political police member. So
is that true for all or most Orthodox, like Greek Orthodox and Armenian, or is it just for Russian?
Just for Russian, because the Russian.
Okay.
Because
is it legal now? Is Russian Orthodoxy legal in Russia?
The guy is also an FSB contributor in Russia, the Kirill, which is the boss of the Orthodox Church in Russia. So it's the same. Not for the Greek, no, not, but everything which came with a huge. So I would say all the countries that had a big Russian influence was. It's hard to express I think it's hard to express the real orthodoxy.
Yeah, well, that's fascinating. I did not know all that.
Yeah, I want to ask you, because I went with that prejudice, but then I raised the question in my head: why you didn't make it a more explicitly Christian book from the beginning?
Yeah, it's a good question. I purposefully wrote this book for the person who's left faith because of a love of science and the idea that they're incompatible. And I wanted to keep it applicable to, the three major monotheistic faiths. And I also wanted it to emphasize what we hold in common. So what Christianity, Islam, and Judaism hold in common, which are, the same sort of description of God, from that he's one infinite, eternal, unknowable. So I stuck with that, and then I put in, why Christianity at the very end, just to kind of communicate my personal beliefs. And I've gotten a lot of flack from evangelical Christians for including, Islam and Judaism in there and not being stronger about why Christianity. But that wasn't really the point of the book. The book was to join the discussion more against atheism and agnosticism, that discussion. And so if I write book 2, it'll probably be a little bit more Christian, but this one was just trying to be God versus no God and those ideas. So
I'm pretty sure that you get more readers excited about the book like this, because you start with the perspective which is shared by a lot of people, I would say, and you leave it open until the end to explain exactly how the things are connected. So I think it's that's why I'm saying it's an interesting book. I will link it down in the show notes caption just for the when I publish the episode, because I think for whomever wants to buy it, it's only available on Amazon, or you have a different place where it's also available.
It's on barnesandnoble.com, amazon.com, and bookshop.org, I think. Okay, so pretty much anywhere online that you order books. It's pretty good.
Nice.
Also, you can read chapter 1 for free on my website. If you go to briancranley.com and sign up, it'll send you chapter 1 if you just want to get a taste of it.
I didn't know that. Thanks for that hint. That I will put everything in the show notes caption below. Brian, I would like to go in the direction of the real world application of the wonder, because I think it's something that, like you said, we have. I think we have the call. I saw it as a practicing, and this is the direction where I went with my questions, to be honest. But you can also give the examples from your perspective, which I think is even more interesting than mine, because you wrote it. How do you keep the wonder alive every day in your life, Brian?
Great question. So I noticed that ever since I learned these ideas in philosophy, that they kind of stuck with me. And after studying theology, a lot of that stuck with me. And then couple that with just a natural love of science, images from the James Webb Telescope, the Large Hadron Collider, all that stuff is just kind of naturally interesting to me. And then I noticed, you're working all day long, you're exhausted, you go home, maybe you have a family, kids. And so we all know there's a mental health crisis in the world today, that, like anxiety, depression are sky high. And I started thinking of it as almost a mental health thing, that I noticed that when I would go to these topics in my mind and start thinking about nature, the Big Bang, theology, you're humbled, you get perspective really quickly. It doesn't take very long. You kind of get outside yourself and outside your problems. And I think it's just an absolutely useful practice to get into. If let's say you read this book, The Call of Wonder, or whatever book you read, just to have that information in your head that you can call upon at any time. And these mysteries are things you could think about the rest of your life. There's not like answers, that you can just answer it. So there's these questions and these mysteries that are outside of yourself. They're bigger than you, and they have this sort of healing quality about them. So I think about them all the time. In between work, if I get stressed out, I will intentionally think about something, related to the book, just to kind of relax and get perspective on life. So it's been, exceedingly helpful for me. But I was doing that for a lot of years before the book. And I think after writing the book, it's only gotten, the wonder has kind of exponentially increased, honestly. It just kind of, these are things you can never get to the bottom of. And that in itself is kind of fascinating.
Do you see wonder as a spiritual practice, or do you see it as a mindset?
Definitely a spiritual practice. And like I said, I think it is the mind part of your soul. And so it is nourishing your soul in a sense. Like we were taught in seminary that knowledge is its own good. Like you don't have to, like the American culture is you learn something so that you can do a job so that you can earn money. Like it's a production value to knowledge. But philosophy, theology, they are a good in themselves. They call them, I don't know, a secondary end or something, where to just learn about these things makes your life richer and more fulfilling. And I've purposefully, increased my reading list now for that exact reason, that knowledge is a good in its own end. And I think it is spiritual, but I think it leads to a more fulfilling life all around.
How do you see, or I will try to formulate it different, because I try to connect the wonder with meditation.
Mhm.
And I see meditation as a part of wonder, because you are wandering, not you are wandering, you are searching for you are searching for something inside yourself. You are trying to connect with maybe with this soul part of yourself, which you don't know exactly how to connect. Do you see it? Do you think meditation is also a spiritual practice?
I guess it depends on what you mean by what type of meditation. Because you can meditate on the scriptures, or you could do like transcendental meditation, like a Buddhist type practice. So I guess it depends on what type of meditation you're referring to there.
Usually, the one that I'm practicing, at least, is the guided respiration. Only so focusing, trying to get the connection with myself, but not to focus on. Try to free your mind. I think it's an exaggeration, because you cannot empty it, like
Yeah.
never. Like, come
Yeah.
on. But you try to get to focus your attention, to control your attention. Actually, that's the point of it.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
kind
I
of
mean,
meditation, I mean.
I don't practice meditation, so I don't. It sounds like it's a calming of the mind and a, focusing on, I guess, clearing out all the thoughts that are constantly coming at you, like a mental practice. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know enough about it to know if you could add wonder into that. Bringing. You're intentionally not thinking about anything? Is that right?
Yes and no, because at the end, you are the intention is to have your focus. You guide your focus, and for
Okay.
me, that's also a way in which we discover ourselves, because we try to control something which is normally not controllable.
Yeah. 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 I don't know how you would add wonder into that unless you were allowed to focus on one thing, and maybe take it with you into meditation. But
Mm-hmm.
I think if you want to do the like the Christian form of meditation, where you're actually trying to meditate on a scripture verse or a topic, I find the great mysteries of theology just fascinating. Like, is Jesus fully God or fully man? You could probably think about that for the rest of your life, because there's been heresies to both sides of that throughout history. Having like these thoughts that you can return to. Frank Sheed talks about an infinite well where you can draw on and gain something more forever. I think it's a type of meditation in itself, and just maybe having that practice where you think about a specific mystery for 5 minutes every day. I think that would be a type of meditation that would be extremely beneficial.
Correct. Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
the place in which you guide your thoughts towards is not so important. It's just the power of control over your thought. That I think that's something which everyone is trying to achieve with meditation.
Yeah.
Um, as a parent, Brian, um, how can we carve the no, how can we nurture the wonder in children?
Gosh, that's a great question. I like the simple 15-minute daily walk. You're trying to get back into nature. That's whether you're, let's say, a believer in God or you're atheist. Either way, God created us in a garden or we evolved outside. I mean, either way, we do better outside or both. So getting back outside, taking your kids outside, and obviously, the screens are a constant battle for all of us. And just, a 15-minute daily walk is just absolutely life-changing. When you go on vacation with your kids, planning in natural wonder, whether it's a museum or a national park or something, having that in mind and being intentional about it, I think is great. Another thing I'm trying to do with my two daughters is I am trying to equally emphasize the importance of science and the importance of faith. And I think that's where people fall off, is they forget one or the other. And so, I want to make sure they know about all the modern science that we're discovering, because that's absolutely fascinating. But I also want them to know about the ancient philosophy and theology and the idea of the soul. And I think when you have both those sides, you're living a much more complete human life. And I think, I'd say those two things: outside, and then make sure you hold the real world, the physical world, and the world of faith in a good tension. I think that's kind of where I'm trying to go.
I can only confirm what you're saying about the walk. I do have this habit with my son since a few months. We are doing it every evening, and with my wife. And I have to say, it's magic what's happening. Like
it's magic. It's so easy.
It's so easy. It's so easy, but it's life changing.
I agree.
Brian, having in mind the fact that the science is evolving, the science is changing, the science is never settled for, I don't know, forever. Do you see a risk in merging science and faith too closely?
I think you have to hold science with an open hand. That idea that you could push it away altogether, but we are discovering a lot of things, and we have some measurements down with pretty astonishing accuracy. And so what I did in this book, I think, I did a lot of theological speculation in this book and throw out some what ifs. And I tried to write it with that attitude in mind that, I'm not saying this is how things are, but kind of like, oh, this is a pretty cool revelation of how faith and science go together. But, me personally, if science changed, I'm holding it with an open hand. So it's not the end of the world if some discovery of science changes. Like, let's say there is a multiverse and it wasn't just the beginning of time at the Big Bang. I'm just fascinated by science, but I don't hold it to be like revelation in the sense of the Bible.
Okay.
What's your thought?
My thought is that, in fact, what we see around us is that somehow we manage to find things from the Bible which are matching with the new scientific discoveries. And I have the feeling that the Bible is there where the science is not yet. And it could be that we are not able to interpret everything that we see there or that we read there. It could be that we are misunderstanding things that were meant in the other way in the Bible. And I think if we are, as I said, not practicing, but I think if we manage to read it right, we might see things that are soon to come in science.
That's a good point. You think of St. Augustine talked about in the Confessions, he talks about, he's writing to God, but he's saying, God, you did not create the universe in the universe. Like, there was no universe for which you to create the universe. And that was, the year, 500-600, something like that, 400 or 500. And then we only discovered recently that there was the idea of a Big Bang and an expanding universe. For centuries upon centuries and millennia, philosophers and scientists thought the universe was eternal and static. And so this idea that space-time itself had a beginning is a really new idea. And so that kind of goes with what you're talking about, that maybe theology knows these things before science gets there. But on the other side, you have to be careful not to, I guess, manipulate the science to fit the Bible or manipulate the Bible to fit the science. And so I tried really hard to take the science as we find it today, what we know, and then, ideas from the past, and tried to keep the two, try to stay loyal to the two ideas and see where they go together.
I think the risk is there. The risk is there. The risk is it's big in manipulating one or the other to fit the other one. And I think that's something that like you said, we have to be really careful with that because it's so easy to go on that path.
And a lot of us do it without knowing it. You're not conscious of your own biases and your upbringing. So I think it's important to realize that you do have biases. I know I did when I wrote the book. I think I started out the book that you just can't get away from the way you're raised and what you've learned. That's just who you are. So,
what kind of reader did you had in mind when you were writing the book, if you had a kind of?
Yeah, when you write, they tell you to try to picture your target reader as an actual person, like one or two people, and pick them out. And for me, that target was my friends up here, the professional person that has an education and they're thinking they love science naturally. They're thinking about, why am I here? The big questions of life, but they're too busy. Because what I realized is none of my friends have this education, this philosophy education that a lot of people used to get. No one has it anymore. So the reason why I wrote the first half of the book to catch people up on this 2,000-year-old conversation, because they probably never heard it. But I think knowing that history is important to developing your own thought on the present. And so that's who I had in mind, the person who loves science, but maybe they were raised with the idea that God's an old man on a cloud and that he's judging you for everything you've done. And now the Big Bang and science, and people like Richard Dawkins and these really loud atheists are screaming, science has figured it all out, figured it all out. So the person who's uneducated just sort of slowly drifts towards, I guess science has it figured out, and everything I learned as a kid is wrong. They just kind of slowly go away, but they don't even realize it's happening. And so that's who I wrote it for, was to kind of pull people back. Hold on, go back to religion. There's a whole rational side to it that is fascinating.
I like the fact that you are mentioning every possible way in which people are talking about this, like the old man sitting on the clouds. It's the funniest one.
Yeah, exactly.
You got a few receptions for your book, and I want to ask you, how is it to be praised both from a NASA scientist and from a hardware neuroscientist?
Oh, you saw that?
Yeah.
So I reached out to each one of those endorsements, and it started because I think my sister said it'd be cool to get an astronaut to endorse the book. And so I found Dr. Tom Jones, because I think he took communion to space. So he had...
I'm sorry that I have to interrupt you. When I saw the name, first I really Googled to see if that's not the singer.
If it was real?
No, because there's a singer. Do you know? Tom Jones?
Oh, yeah. Different one.
Absolutely. Okay. Sorry for interrupting you, Brian.
No, so after he agreed to read it and endorse it, I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I thought I'd really like to have a scientist who's at a PhD level for space, biological life, and the human mind. And so I found these people like Dr. Martin Novak wrote books that are like really similar to mine, but I didn't find them until I found him. I searched for somebody like that, and he's an evolutionary or mathematical models of evolutionary biology at Harvard professor. And his book, Beyond and Within, are just absolutely fascinating. They like take mine to the next level. And so we also realized that in both of our books, we have this sort of feminine wisdom, divine figure in both the books. And in mine, it's like a fable that runs through every chapter where she's guiding you. Lady Wisdom is like guiding you through the book. And he has like the same character. It was really crazy. And so him and I have stayed in touch, and we're talking a lot. And then Dr. Sofia Carrozza is a neuroscientist, PhD level, who's also a believer. And she told me when I emailed her, she said, I'll be happy to read the book, but I'll let you know I've been asked a lot of times to endorse, and I've never given an endorsement. So she was kind of warning me up front. And then when she came back and said, I like what you're doing here, I want to endorse it, that was a huge honor, because she hasn't endorsed anyone before. And so I took that, that was pretty awesome.
it's not important that you reach them. It's important that they have done it, because nobody would do it if they don't believe what they are writing. This is my feeling, at least. So I think that's the most important.
Yeah, and I didn't pay any of them. I just asked them. They were very kind.
I mean, I don't. I will not go that road. Now I have to ask you a serious question. I can't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did writing the book changed the way in which your friends, colleagues are seeing you?
For sure. Yeah. I think it's probably true for a lot of us, a lot of people listening. I think about these things a lot, and I have for 20 years because I went to school for them, but also because I think a lot of us are just wired that way. But I almost never talked about them. You know, I'm running a medical device business, and so, you know, your day-to-day is about med device, not about philosophy and theology and whatever.
Zero relation. Zero.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, I think now that I wrote it, some people are like, that's a whole new dimension that, you know, but it has opened up phenomenal conversations with people that you never would have talked about this stuff before. And so I think trying to approach it from both sides, science and faith, allows people to be open to being honest. Like, I've had atheist friends come up and say they're atheists. I didn't know that before. And so it opens the conversation because, I don't know, it's all in a book now. You can just go read what I think. It's all in a book. It's out there.
That's a nice point of view. I mean, if you want to know what I think about, just read the book.
Just read the book.
Yeah. What do you want listeners to take away from the book? If it would be one thing from the book.
Well, I mean, I want them to take away that God is real, but I think, like we talked about, a return to wonder. I think that's, I don't mean it in the cheesy sense, but like authentic wonder. I think that is one of our like final ends as humans. If, you know, if heaven is real and it exists, I think part of that experience of the afterlife is going to be sort of the aha moment that never ends. Like, you're just constantly the aha moment for eternity. And I think that starts now with things like wonder. And so preparing for that it's the well that never runs dry. I think it'll restore a lot of mental health, I think, is what I'm trying to get at. You know, the whole nihilistic, I'm just a body, you know, nothing matters, leads to depression. And so I think it restores a mental health because I think it's reality. It's true that there is a spiritual side to things, but that's what I hope they take away.
I think as well that if you find it, if you manage to find it, it could be a cure maybe for the cynicism and the burnout that we have these days.
Yeah. And there's a lot of ideas out there. It's not like you're just learning this is the way it is. These are like the great book series, the great thinkers of history. There's competing ideas, but if you don't even know what those are, you can't formulate your own ideas off of those. So,
correct.
Time to jump back in that conversation.
Brian, it was an amazing discussion. We are not finished, but I have to mention it again. I knew it was nice, but I didn't expect how nice it would be. I have to.
Yeah.
I'm positively surprised.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it too, man. It's been awesome.
I usually have 5 rapid fire questions tailored to the guest at the end, and I also have them for you. I haven't sent them out up front because the element of surprise plays a big factor, and spontaneity plays a big factor in it. So, most awe-inspiring scientific fact you've ever learned?
The current or the estimated size of the universe, just absolutely mind-blowing.
True. I follow Brian Cox. I follow Brian Cox.
I like him a lot.
An amazing human being.
Explains everything so well.
And the passion with which she explains, it's
I think he's my favorite also. I like Brian Cox a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. philosopher, or a theologian that you would like to have dinner with?
Let's say Augustine, because he was a philosopher and a theologian, and he started out a lot of these ideas on the Christian thread that the Christianity, followed. And he was a normal guy, He lived a life of ill repute for a long time and then had a conversion. He was just kind of this normal guy that became a world-class thinker, and that'd be cool to meet him.
One daily habit that keeps your sense of wonder alive. I think we mentioned walking already.
Daily walk, yeah, 100%. The 15-minute daily walk. I don't do it every day, but I try almost every day to get outside.
I did want to mention, because you mentioned walking, and I had a long period in my life when I was waking up 5 a.m. every morning, and I had a 1.5 hour walk.
Nice.
And I usually got to see the sunrise every morning outside. That's
beautiful.
Magic. That's just
that
magic.
Is magical. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. If you had to choose, telescope or microscope?
Telescope. I'm a space guy.
Absolutely. And what's the single word you'd use to describe the relationship between science and faith?
Wonder. I mean, I just think it's written in the human person, which is what's so fascinating. You can watch it happen to people, whether they're atheist or a believer. Just that sense of awe and wonder when you encounter God, and then when you encounter space, let's say it's almost a very similar experience.
That's why I want to say it's almost the same. Brian, thanks so much. Tell people what's next for you. Is there another book in the making?
Oh yeah, I'm working on book 2, which is much more about. So I talked about how the soul has the intellect and the will. One is to contemplate, and one is to choose. So this first book was about the intellect and how the experience of God is in your mind and in the intellect of the soul. Book 2 is going to be about the will and how it's going to be centered around peace, the idea of experiencing peace, and how to experience that by choosing the good. So the intellect knows the good and the will chooses the good. And, in religion, we say God is the summum bonum, the highest good. And so that's why there's no peace without him, because he sort of orders your life. And so second book, I'm a big experience guy, and so the second book is going to be centered around the experience of peace.
I'm waiting for that email when the book is out.
Awesome. Yeah.
Brian, thank you so much. It was an awesome discussion, I have to say it again.
It was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Time. Absolutely. And I'm waiting for the email to your when your next book is out.
Very cool. Thank you very much.
Brian, tell people where they can find you.
My website, Brian Cranley, BrianCranley.com. That's where you can get chapter 1 and also get that email about when the next book is coming out. And then I'm on actually LinkedIn as a social media the most, and also X a little bit. But LinkedIn is what I had before I wrote the book, so I kind of built off there. And I post a lot of things like book signings and stuff.
Brian, thank you very much for your time. And I really hope we can do this again one day.
For sure. Let's definitely do it again.
Talk to you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.